Welcome back, VCF, to Biggest Little Victory. This is Stephen.
And Pastor Kendra.
And we are here to cover David's sermon from this last week, Fear for the Wing. It's a little, if you were there, you might have seen there was a little glitch on the bulletin. There's an extra G in there. I don't know if maybe was that like an autocorrect kind of a thing? Like they were just typing it in?
Maybe, but you never know.
You never know. I like it though. Yeah. You showed that to me. So Fear for the Wing. It's supposed to be Fear for the Win. And we're going to be talking a little bit about fear again this week. Before we get into that, though, we have some announcements. Kendra, what is coming up?
Okay, so this week, in honor of Independence Day, we're not transitioning. Bad phrasing. We are only having 2 services this week instead of our new normal of 3 at 9:30 and 11 a.m. If you're usually in the 8 a.m. service, just pick one of those in which you would rather go to and just show up. You're more than welcome.
Just a heads up,
masks.
9 a.m. Oh, yes, sorry, masks.
Yes.
Do that first.
Yes, so masks are mandatory due to the governor's orders. So please, if you have a mask, bring it. If not, we have a limited supply to give to you, and they're hard to find right now. So please, if you have one, bring your own. But we do have some to offer if you don't. But what were you going to say, Stephen?
I was just going to say, if you do choose between the two, 9 a.m. tends to be the more popular one. So 11 might be better. But then again, I know how schedules are sometimes.
And especially with the holiday weekend, we don't expect our normal attendance.
True.
So
that is true. But also, and on that note, if you need masks, I did notice that there were quite a few different grocery stores. I know Smith's actually has a whole section where they have masks, and Walmart has a lot of disposable masks as well. So, like we said, it is a mandate from the governor. So make sure you bring it when you come to see us, just so we all stay safe.
100%. All right. So 2 services, 9:30, 11 this week. Okay. And also small groups are starting back up. Mine is on Saturday nights, and we're going through a Bible study on Proverbs, and we just have a really good time, really awesome fellowship. But there are more to choose from. If you would like to become part of a small group, please reach out to one of the million pastors that VCF has, and they will point you in the direction in which we think that would be a best fit for you. And the most exciting news that we have this month is that we are starting our LGBTQ plus discussion group. It is going to be a 4-part discussion group to start off with. It starts on Saturday, July 11th at 9:30 a.m. 9:30 a.m. At the church. Pastor 𝗙𝗲 is heading it, and she is doing an incredible job in articulating in exactly what it is. But it's really just a safe place for people to talk about what it means to be part of the LGBTQ community, plus being part of a church. Plus that expands, if you're an LGBTQ member who has always believed in Christ but has been turned away from other churches. This is a great place, a safe place. It's a safe place to talk about what it means, and there's going to be biblical theology to back everything up, and it's a safe place. So it's going to be really exciting. I'm really excited to be part of it, but they are meeting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, not different lessons. It's to accommodate whatever you can do. So Tuesdays and Saturdays, same curriculum of the same week. But if you are interested in doing that, please reach out to Pastor Rhiannon or Pastor 𝗙𝗲, or if you happen to be one of our few listeners that have no idea who those people are, reach out to us, Stephen or myself, or you can reach out to our Victory Christian Fellowship Facebook, and you will be pointed in the right direction. And to top that off, follow us on YouTube at VCF Reno, Instagram at VCF Reno, Twitter at BLV Podcast, even though it's an epic failure. But main thing, make sure you follow us on Facebook. That's where you can reach out to us and get a pretty much immediate response. So Facebook at Victory Christian Fellowship. And that's it.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we have a little different way of presenting the good news story this time. It's not an audio clip. Kendra is going to read this one, and it's fantastic. So she'll read that, and then we can discuss and get into the rest of the lesson.
All right, you guys, I'm going to try really hard not to cry while I'm reading this.
All of you might cry too. Right.
So I got this off of readersdigest.ca, which I think is actually Canadian.
That's Canadian. Yeah.
Canadian Reader's Digest. So there is no date on this, so I don't know when it was, but it doesn't matter. It's a timeless story. So it's called Love Conquers All. Naples resident Luca Trapanese had long wanted to to adopt a child, but that presented problems for a gay single man in Italy. I was told that I'd only be given a child with an illness, a severe disability, or with behavioral problems, says Trapanese 41. But he didn't hesitate when an orphanage called to say that they had a month-old baby called 𝗙𝗲 with Down syndrome that had been abandoned by its mother and rejected by 20 potential adoptive families. Trapanese says, since I was 14, I have volunteered and worked with the disabled, so I felt I had the right experience. When I first held 𝗙𝗲 in my arms, I was overcome with joy. Trapanese has documented his and his daughter's life together over 2 years on social media, challenging stereotypes about fatherhood and the idea of family. I didn't mean it to be that way, he says, but this is nothing but our life story.
That's so good.
It's so good.
It's so amazing.
It's so amazing.
I just love that so much.
And we could take a leaf out of Italy's book. You know, like, not only giving children who have problems to gay couples, but it's okay for gay couples to adopt children, but we won't get into that.
Right.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. No,
but I just think it's beautiful. You know, it's a single man who really wanted children, and he adopted this beautiful baby with Down syndrome, and she's absolutely gorgeous. So it's really amazing. Just the feel good power of it.
Absolutely. Well, and you know, those other families, who knows why they said no? You know, they may have had legitimate reasons for saying no,
right,
to the child. But you hope that it wasn't just because, like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with that, right? You know, it's like it's encouraging to see that, you know, everyone gets to be loved, everyone gets to have a home, and you know, I know that just especially myself being adopted, you know, so I know what that's like to be chosen. Like, that's a cool thing to be chosen. Not to say that anyone who's with their birth parents wasn't chosen, but it's just like, it's kind of like a double choosing kind of a thing. You know, my birth parents wanted me to still have a home, so they were still okay with me being alive, and you know, then I got to be adopted. And so to see that happen to this child and for this man who just wanted kids so badly, that's so cool.
Right.
That's such a great story.
Very beautiful story. And I highly suggest reading those Reader's Digest. Don't read them too much because we're probably going to use them a lot, but don't get too far into it. Yeah. But they're short and they're just fun to read. And absolutely. We could use all the feel good news that we need, that we could get right now.
No kidding. Yeah. This has been one heck of a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, thankful to the firefighters, actually, because there was a fire that was close to my apartment, and I was worried about that, and that was kind of pretty scary because I was all the way out. I was far away from my apartment, and I was hoping that, you know, if they were going to give evacuation orders, I was going to have to rush back home and grab my dog, but they worked hard to get that fire out. So thank you to our hardworking firefighters, to those of you who are battled the blazes in the midst of the heat and the wind. I mean, that's
that wind
the worst conditions to be battling a fire in, and they worked hard. So special thanks to them.
Peavine isn't having a good year so far.
No, not at all.
For those of you who don't know, Peavine's a mountain here in Reno, Nevada. That's what I meant by that.
Yeah. So David talked on Sunday about, and we were still going through Hebrews, going through Labor Day. We'll be going through Hebrews. And this he titled Fear for the Win. We like to say wing because that's so much
the adorable typo.
Fun. Just kind of talking about how fear can be a motivator for us. A lot of times we think we have to vanquish fear, or that when it comes to God, we don't have to be afraid because he's God. He's Abba Father. He's Daddy. And we don't have to be afraid of him.
Don't call him Daddy.
I'm sorry, but that's what it means. That's what
the internet has ruined that word for me.
I know. But so, you know, it's like he's supposed to be our friend. He's supposed to be someone that we can just come to and talk to. And there are verses that talk about how we can approach the throne boldly with confidence. But it's also, we need to remember who we are. And it reminds me actually of your favorite verse, Kendra, of Isaiah chapter 6, actually. So favorite chapter of when Isaiah is in front of the throne room and is just in awe of God. And his first reaction is, I'm dead. Like, this is it. I'm done. I'm ruined. I'm over because I'm standing in the presence of a holy God. So as much as we should be confident in coming to God, at the same time, remember who he is. And so we should have a healthy level of fear for God. but there are other things that we should fear, and we're going to go over that. And that's kind of what David talked about, so we're going to break down. We are in Hebrews chapter 5, starting in verse 7, going through the end and all the way until chapter 6, verse 12. And follow along if you'd like, or sit back and we will discuss it in just a second. While Jesus lived on earth, he prayed to God and asked God for help. He prayed with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And his prayer was heard because he trusted God. Even though Jesus was the Son of God, he learned obedience by what he suffered. And because his obedience was perfect, he was able to give eternal salvation to all who obey him. In this way, God made Jesus a high priest, a priest like Melchizedek. We have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain because you are so slow to understand. By now, you should be teachers, but you need someone to teach you again the first lessons of God's message. You still need the teaching that is like milk. You are not ready for solid food. Anyone who lives on milk is still a baby and knows nothing about right teaching. But solid food is for those who are grown up. They are mature enough to know the difference between good and evil. So let us go on to grown-up teaching. Let us not go back over the beginning lessons we learned about Christ. We should not again start teaching about faith in God and about turning away from those acts that lead to death. We should not return to the teaching about baptisms, about laying on of hands, about the raising of the dead and eternal judgment. And we will go on to grown-up teaching if God allows. Some people cannot be brought back again to a changed life. They were once in God's light and enjoyed heaven's gift and shared in the Holy Spirit. They found out how good God's word is, and they received the powers of his new world. But they fell away from Christ. It is impossible to bring them back to a changed life again, because they are nailing the Son of God to a cross again and are shaming him in front of others. Some people are like land that gets plenty of rain. The land produces a good crop for those who work it, and it receives God's blessings. Other people are like land that grows thorns and weeds and is worthless. It is about to be cursed by God and will be destroyed by fire. Dear friends, we are saying this to you, but we really expect better things from you that will lead to your salvation. God is fair. He will not forget the work you did and the love you showed for him by helping his people. And he will remember that you are still helping them. We want each of you to go on with the same hard work all your lives, so you will surely get what you hope for. We do not want you to become lazy. Be like those who through faith and patience will receive what God has promised.
Okay, so the first thing that I get from that is Hebrews chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. I'm reading from the NIV version, but I'm just going to read it from that version just so you guys can see what I'm kind of working with here. We want each of you to show the same diligence to the very end, so that what you hope for may be fully realized. We do not want you to become lazy, but to imitate those who through faith and patience inherit what has been promised. So it's so funny to me because the two different versions we read, the only thing that's common is we do not want you to become lazy.
That's true.
That is the only thing that is said the exact same way in the two different versions that Stephen and I read. And I think that's the most important part, really. Yeah. Is you don't want to be lazy in real life. You know, you don't want to just sit on your couch and do nothing. I mean, you want to, but you know that it's not ideal to.
Probably not going to produce the results that you want in your life.
Right. So it's important to do that in your real life, and it's also important to do that in your walk with Christ. You know, don't ever become lazy in that walk. Keep walking. Don't ever stop walking, because the second you stop walking is the second that Jesus stops walking with you. Not like he's always with you, so that was bad wording, but the more steps you take, the more you learn. And if you stop walking to learn, Jesus is going to stop exactly where you are, and it's not his job to tell you where to go. And I know that that's kind of what some Christians focus on, is like, I'm just waiting for Jesus to tell me where to go. And I'm like,
they're waiting on God's calling before they do anything.
Right. And it's like, I get that. I do 100%, but it's more of like, go try this and he'll show you if that's right or not.
Right. Yep.
He doesn't just tell you what to do next. He doesn't bring you to a fork in the road and tell you which way to go. He brings you to a fork in the road and tells you whichever one you pick is either going to be the right one or the wrong one. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to be there to show you.
Yeah, I think every situation is different. You know, there are times definitely God could show you and say, go this way. This is the way I want you to go.
I've had dreams like that, you know, so And there's times also that he wants us to stop and be patient and consider things. And there's nothing wrong with thinking about what you're about to do. You know, if you're moving across the country, if you're going to change jobs, if you're thinking about having a child, you know, these are things that you probably shouldn't just jump into and be like, yeah, sure, whatever, and just go for it. You probably want to be a little methodical and think things through and decide, is this right for me? And, but as you're doing those things, sometimes we are asked to hold back and speak with God and bring that before his attention. And other times we do just need to jump out in faith. Sometimes it's a matter of taking that leap of faith and saying, you know what, I'm going to move. I'm going to do this because I want to do this. I think it's going to be a good thing, and I'm going to bring God with me. And that's how it's going to succeed, is that my faith in God is going to carry me through this scary time or uncertain time, whatever it ends up being. Right. It's basically jumping off a cliff and hoping you get caught.
Right.
And that sounds terrifying. You know, but that's, you know, you kind of got to Hail Mary it sometimes.
Right.
That's the way life goes.
And I think that happens a lot with faith too. You know, faith is a lot of a Hail Mary, you know, because first of all, you're taking this leap for someone you've never seen. Okay. Because we've never seen God. And we're taking this leap of faith for this God who defies logic. His existence defies logic. It doesn't make any sense that there can be a being who has always been. There's no beginning, there's no end to him. That doesn't make any sense. Time doesn't work with that. You know, physics doesn't work with that. So that already is a leap of faith right there. And obviously there are people who think, you know, we're crazy for believing that there is a God and think that we are of a certain mindset that needs this belief. So already there's somewhat of a leap of faith in that regard. Personally, I just think that there's too much proof for God for me to not believe in him. But that's, you know, that's a side conversation that you and I can have when we see each other on the street. But, you know, I think that when you drift away, when you get lazy, when you just decide to stop, I think that it's kind of like there was a philosopher that said, when you see somebody running, are they running to something or are they running away from something? And he said the answer is both. Because if you're going from point A to point B, you're running from point A to point B. And I think that a faith with God is kind of the same. You're either moving towards him or you're moving away. So you get lazy, you're just drifting away. You're just moving away from God. Not that he's moving away from you. It's just that you won't be able to hear him as clearly. It's kind of like you're getting tuned out, or he's getting tuned out by other frequencies. Like if you're
getting put into a plastic bubble. Exactly.
Yeah. It becomes harder and harder and harder to hear him. And he gets drowned out by all the other voices. So, yeah, it's kind of, that's funny that phrasing is the same in both, is don't be lazy.
Right.
You know, it's
right. Like, we do not want you to become lazy. Everything is different except for that.
That's great.
But speaking of differences, so if you listen to Pastor David's sermon on Sunday, which if you haven't, you need to turn us off and go do that on YouTube at VCF Reno, and then come back and see what we're talking about here. But the main thing that he talked about was the elementary truths. And what version are you reading?
The New Century Version.
Okay, so in the New Century Version, they don't say elementary truths.
They do not.
But in the NIV version, they do. Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12. In fact, though, by this time, you ought to be teachers. You need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. So Stephen's version that he's reading put it in a way that kind of made me giggle. You know, like, you're a baby. You still need milk. You know, like you're not ready for solid food. You know, and it just made me think of big fat baby.
No, yeah, verse 11. I know. I immediately just saw that because it's like, because you are so slow to understand. Is how it phrases it. It's like, this is a way of saying you're stupid.
when you were reading it, the first time, I was like, whoa, dang, man. Whoever the authors of Hebrew is rude.
Right. Pretty salty individual at this point.
Right. So, so the elementary truths is, there's something that Pastor David said about that. He said that if you don't go past the elementary truths of Christ, our spiritual walks are dying. So kind of talks about what we already have been talking about, you know, and it's not so much that it fizzles away. It's just that it's stuck where you left it. So being a Christian, and especially being a Christian in a ministerial role, you're always learning.
Yeah.
You're always learning. And you don't have to be licensed or anything to be a minister. I've been taught more from Stephen here, who is technically a layman of the church, than I have of my own mentors. But it's because Stephen and I talk a lot more than we do with them, and everything's been so crazy. But Stephen is very knowledgeable in his biblical scripture. And so I learn a lot just from my conversations with Stephen. But the point is that I'm willing to continue learning. Yeah. And that I want to continue learning. And just that simple fact means that my walk is still going, and my walk will continue going until I reach the throne room. And that's just how it is. You know, you're walking along this long path, but it ends at the throne room. And like Pastor David says, I love it when he says it. I'll probably say it a million times over the next couple of years of this podcast, that, you know, he'll either say, you know, welcome my faithful servant, or away from me, I never knew you. Right. And if I walked up to the throne room and God said, away from me, I never knew you, I'd be confused. One, because I'm like, what? You know, but some people, you know, aren't prepared for that. Right. You know, they think that because they believe, that's step one, 100% believe, but learn. You gotta learn. You gotta understand why it is this way. You know, you don't just, you know, most of the time, this is a bad analogy, the one that came off the top of my head, I was thinking of like doctors, where they're like, oh, you have this, and then you just believe your doctors. That's not how it is. You know, I can see why that would be a bad analogy. Right. I had something else in my head, but it's the opposite of doctors. Yeah. You know, like you someone who just purports to be an authority figure, so then you just trust. Right. Because they look like an authority figure. But even the most senior pastor that you know is still learning. Yep. Absolutely. And I assume that's the same way with doctors. Doctors are always learning as well. But, you know, and it's also, I guess it is kind of the same, because, you know, we go to church every Sunday and we take what our pastor says and we absorb it. And that's our walk. You know, so I guess it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. I mean, because doctors, what they're telling you is what based off of their training. And as right, so I take back what I said. It's a perfect analogy. New information, then you know they might change their answer as they continue to learn. Because there was a phrase, and it came from a sitcom, but I mean, I'm sure it's partially true, that half of what you learn out of medical school is already out of date by the time you're done. You know, because medicine keeps changing, science keeps changing, and we get new technology, we get new procedures, safer ways to do things, new procedures that didn't exist years ago. I mean, look at all the ways that we can transplant now. Right. Different like face transplants. That's new. Yeah. You know, that didn't exist. You can have completely new skin. Yeah. In a couple procedures, you can have completely new skin. Right. You could have a new nose, a new butt, a new bosom, a new gender. And they're coming up with fake organs, or coming up with using stem cells to make your own seriously, organs. We're all going to be like iRobot here soon. It's a crazy field, but yeah, doctors are always learning. And that's what they say, is they're practicing medicine. You know, they're practicing. So there we go. We proved my original statement wrong, that it was a bad analogy. It's actually quite good reality. And I wouldn't say so much that pastors are practicing religion.
I would say more that pastors are preaching what they know.
There we go.
And as they continue to learn, they continue to preach what they now know.
Well, that's kind of a thin line though, Stephen. Because there's a lot of pastors out there who preach their opinions.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
And just because
too much of themselves into the gospel.
Right. So you gotta be careful with that one. Our particular pastors do not do that, but
ideally pastors,
if the church were the church that it's supposed to be,
right,
the capital C church,
then you have pastors.
Our lowercase c church is fantastic.
And the ideal sense that, and the pastors that I know, they preach from a point of, this is what I know to be true of the word, but they are always in that position of, I can learn. And willing to hear whatever you have to say about it. So that's huge about, I think that also ties into laziness, because, once you learn so much, then you're like, cool, I know it all, and then you don't care to learn anymore, and you're just kind of comfortable with what you know. And that's how you get ignorance.
Right. That's how you get OJ. No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
man. I'm watching a bunch of documentaries right now, so it's like prominent in my brain.
There you go.
Anyway.
This may seem like a corny comment, but do you ever think of how like documentaries are the podcasts of TV?
No, it's 100% true. The only thing is that you can take one in the car with you. Safely. Exactly.
Safely, right. I was thinking about the other day, and I was like, documentaries are just like podcasts. It's like podcasts you can see.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And sometimes I could deal without the dramatizations in some of the documentaries. So yeah, podcasts for the win.
Plus, you can do so much more while you're watching a podcast. You can multitask.
Yeah, headphones, do the dishes, fold laundry. You got it.
It's great.
Mm-hmm.
So
anyway,
with talking about, that was just a side thought that I had.
Yep.
Like I said, corny. I don't care.
Right. No, it's actually accurate. Very accurate.
But so he was talking about fear and what we should be afraid of. And so some of this he said, but others that I kind of expanded on. So here's kind of the list that I came up with. There is a healthy fear that we should have for God. Fear of rejecting him. Fear of thinking we know more than him. Fear of leading people away from God, fear of focusing on the wrong thing, and fear of missing out on what he has for us. So those were just kind of a few things that I put together, because the more I kept thinking about it as he said this, like, we have this fear about missing out on something, fear of pushing God aside. And a lot of times we're not afraid of sin. And actually, that was something that my mom once said to me, that she was afraid of sin. And I thought, that's ridiculous. You're not supposed to be afraid of anything. You should be able to conquer all fear. But of course, I was saying this out of a 14-year-old's mindset, so I didn't really know too much spiritually yet. And the more I learned, the more I kind of realized where she was coming from, this fear of sin, because sin separates kind of, not necessarily separates you from God, but it separates your feeling of closeness with him. And it separates your relationship with him, because it creates this barrier that you now have between you and God, because now you're focusing on the sin. Your mind has changed. Your thoughts are altered. And the more you choose sin, the more you're going to choose sin in the future. Well, I guess I should be careful about saying that, but the more that you choose sin, the easier it can be to choose sin in the future. And that's kind of why she feared it, is because something like that, something as simple as a white lie, something as simple as that sort of thing, can cause your brain to enjoy that, a white lie, to enjoy the sin and to enjoy what you shouldn't be doing. And that's why she was afraid of sin. And so I kind of agree with it now, that because of the power that sin has to separate. And just so from there, that's why I expanded into it, like fear of rejecting him. Like I would be afraid to reject God, because then I miss out on who God is, and I'm afraid that I would ever think that I know more than him, because then I'm God. If I know more than God, then I'm God. So what's the point?
Right. Which is never what we should strive to be, because then you're just living a pointless life.
Yeah. So,
and he's up there laughing at you or being really disappointed because he's like, I created you for something better than that, you dimwit.
And there's a verse, I think it's in 2 Corinthians, that talks about like our our wisest moments is God's most foolish. And, so it's like, how much better is his wisdom than ours if, the best that we can come up with is at his weakest. I have to look that up to be sure. It might even be Colossians, but
they're so similar in name.
I know.
At least
that's the problem. There's too many similar names.
It's kind of funny because that kind of segues into my next point. Because a part of fearing God is fearing when he is going to return. And the reason why we fear that he's going to return, at least me personally, is because if the second coming of Christ comes, that means that we're probably done here.
Yeah.
So I fear that because I don't feel like I'm done here. So Pastor David said, instead of wondering when the second coming is happening, let's focus on being ready for when it does. And that struck. That struck hard because I just said it. I fear for that. I 100% am so scared for when the second coming of Christ happens because I'm not done here. I do not feel like I'm done here. However, what Pastor David said made me realize that it's not my choice. It's not my choice on whether or not I'm done here or not.
Right.
And if it is to the point where I am done here, then I hope that I have served his kingdom in the way that he intended me to. And that, we'll go up there being homies. But I'm not going to lie. I'm still scared. I'm still scared of it.
I think it makes sense because even when I first heard about that and I really started to just, I don't know how to say it, not just contemplate, but really just get stuck on this thought of eternity, it started to scare me because as people, we're finite and everything that around us is finite. Our pets will eventually get old and die. Our houses will eventually...
He doesn't mean it, Kitty. He doesn't mean it.
Our houses will eventually fall apart and need to be repaired. Cars need to be replaced. Everything falls apart. Everything ends. And to think of our soul never ending and being somewhere. And even though you're told how great heaven is, you're told that heaven's paradise, heaven's amazing, heaven's everything you could ever want it to be. At the same time, this idea of forever almost is still scary because you don't understand that. You don't understand what about after 100,000 years? Aren't we just going to be bored? Isn't God going to be bored with us and just want to start over? And do we just do it all over again and get a second chance to...
Well, that's why we're not made immortal.
Yeah, right. And I think that's just kind of natural for mortal beings to fear the immortal because we don't understand it and we fear what we don't understand. And even though we're promised life with God and presence and to be in his presence, it's still scary because we don't understand what that's going to look like. 1,000,000 years with God, what are we going to do? What are we going to look like? What's that going to look like? And I think there are times where at first I can be really excited for it, and I'm like, this is cool. But the longer, if I dwell on it too long, then I'm like, yeah, but how?
Right.
And I start to freak out. And then I start to get sad because I think about but what about the people that I really like here and that I really want to be there? Are they going to be there? And,
right.
And then it starts to really get scary because then you just so badly want to just go out there and be the street preacher and save as many people as you can because you're just afraid of losing so many.
Right. Not like Little Nicky Street Preacher, though.
No.
It's not a Christian movie. It's an Adam Sandler movie.
Gotcha.
But anyway, when people say street preacher, that's the first thing I think about. But anyway, sorry.
Well, yeah. Well, and most people, street preacher tends to be the finger pointing, you're going to hell guy.
Yeah,
but
Satan is within you.
Yep. The classic.
Yep. Yeah. No, I struggle with that last bit because I feel like I'm just starting my life.
Right. Yeah.
So I struggle with it.
My dad said to me once, he gave a football analogy for the timeline of my life. He said, you're probably somewhere in your first quarter and I'm somewhere around the last quarter.
Oh my gosh.
That's what he tells me. He's like, I'm probably in the fourth quarter. And I was like, well, hopefully not.
Well, how many downs are you, Dad? Yeah.
let's calm down a little bit here.
Right. I'd say 3/4 with 2 minutes remaining.
So yeah, it's, there's still so much. And I mean, let's say even if I were to live what the average lifespan of a man is it 76 now?
Oh God, I don't even look at that stuff because it just scares me.
I don't remember now. It could be higher than that. But let's say I live to be 100, you know, I'm 30 now. That means I still have 70 years. That means I still have more than...
God.
I still have more than twice my life that I've lived so far to still be alive at that point. Actually 3 times.
And just imagine what can happen in 70 years. Look at what's happened in the past 70 years.
Look what's happened in 1 year.
Well, right, but I'm talking like technologically and all that jazz. By that time, we might be in WALL-E, where we're all just fat and robots are controlling our lives, and we have completely had to. I could. I totally 100%
I would miss running.
God, no. No, I would thrive. I would thrive. I don't want it because I know it's not healthy, but I know it's not healthy, you know, but there are those people, and like everybody in WALL-E, where they're like, nope, this is how I live now.
Right.
I'm fat and I don't even use my legs.
And the coolest thing is changing the color of your suit.
And it's like a tracksuit, like
it was a tracksuit,
like a Russian tracksuit.
You're just always wearing pajamas.
Right. Expect everybody to have chest hair and gold rings popping out of it.
Fear for the Win, where we talk about WALL-E and tracksuits
and chest hair.
This is great.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, yeah. No, I know what you feel though, because it's like, man, I just feel like I'm just waking up. Especially my 20s were depressing. I mean, a lot of people's 20s are depressing. But it happens, you know. You don't know what you're doing.
No, it's so true. I'm crying because it's true.
You're constantly guessing about your life, and you think you know everything, and then you immediately get smacked right back down on your butt and realize you don't know anything.
It's from like 12 to 28.
Yeah,
like
so it's this perpetual
28.
cycle of like, I know everything. No, I really don't. Oh, but I do now. No, I still don't. And eventually you get to 30 where you're just like, you know what? I still don't, and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to work with what I got. But now it's like, I'm excited. I'm in a church. I want to serve. I'm excited about Jesus. I'm excited about the Bible. I'm learning more. And especially like as you're becoming a pastor for Kendra, going that route, maybe being a storyteller, being a filmmaker, and I want to tell stories and I want to encourage people that way. It's like, we're just at this cusp of like so many great, awesome things. And at the same time to realize that at any point that could just come to an end. And it could either come to an end like on the drive home. That could be the last time you ever drive your car. It could be
worst fear.
You know, I mean, it can be, and a lot of people think that's morbid, but it's like it's also reality, and it's something that we need to know that life is fragile, and we need to appreciate the people that we have and appreciate the moments that we have, because you don't know. And even if it's not from a death standpoint, because the last 3 podcasts now talked about death.
Yeah, we're getting pretty morbid here.
But even if it's not from that, you know, you might only have one chance to make a first impression on somebody. You know, someone comes to your church, and if everyone in your church treats them like they're not welcome, are they going to come back? They might not ever come back. They might be like, well, you know, I tried, but everyone there just stared at me like I didn't belong, so I guess I don't belong. And that might be your one chance, you know, so never take things for granted.
Never
take things for granted. Never take people for granted. And don't be lazy in how you are approaching people. Don't take the lazy way out and just say, hey, welcome to our church. Here's your bulletin. See ya. You know, take a chance and be a friend with that person. Sit down with them. If they have questions, be willing to answer. Take them out for lunch afterwards.
But don't touch them. 6 feet, y'all.
Yes, 6 feet. Make sure you wear your mask. But, you know, and just be Christ to people, be God to people. And that's kind of what the writer of Hebrews is talking about with this, like, you're so slow to understand this. Like, you should know this by this point. You should know.
He's snapping at you, telling you to hurry up.
Snapping at you. Like, you should know that you should be there for people. This should not be something we have to tell you every single week. Be there for people. What you do for the least of these is what you do for Jesus.
All people.
All of them.
All people.
So it's like...
Do you hear me? All people. Every single human being on this planet. You be there for them. And that's the real Christian thing to do.
Kendra, will Jesus slap you if you don't?
I will slap you with my very heavy Bible.
The bullet taker.
Yeah, 100% that thing could stop a bullet. Thing's huge. I got like huge font in it, like an old lady.
I had a Bible just like that. That's what I called it.
Massive.
The bullet taker.
Yep. I'll slap you with it. So I'm going to say it one more time. All people. All people. That's 2 more times.
Let that sink in. I didn't want to interrupt you. I wanted her voice to just carry the weight. Let that sink in, everybody. Seriously, though.
Yeah.
All people. I mean, there are people you don't want to. There are people that you really don't want to show love to. And at that point, you have to ask, do you get to decide their fate? Or is that up to Jesus?
Or just don't be mean to them.
Or, yeah.
Don't do anything to them.
Yeah.
Just go about your business and let them go about theirs. If you don't want to help them, then don't. But don't be mean to them.
You don't have to tear them down the process. Right. So, I mean, if anything has been so frustrating to watch, it's certainly been that for people who say that they are a part of the family of God and definitely do not act as a part of the family of God.
They talk about Judgment Day. I'm like, yeah, wait until Judgment Day, lady. Or dude. Whatever you are.
Right, they're so excited about
But they're only ladies or dudes. There's nothing else.
They're so
with them at least.
Right. They're so excited about Judgment Day, and it's like, you're not going to be happy either. Like, we're all going to have to stand to account.
Yep. Just you wait.
So,
to quote the great Hamilton musical, which is coming out on Disney Plus on Friday. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. History has its eyes on you. History has its eyes on you.
Yeah.
And so does God.
Yep.
So does God.
And we talked about that last week with secrets.
Yep.
And actually,
you may be keeping them in your brain, but they're not fully kept.
They're not fully kept. The man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.
Dun, dun, dun.
That is 1 Samuel, everyone. 1 Samuel. So actually, if you're listening to this by this point, I will have released the last 3 episodes as the third.
It's been really busy.
It's been so busy, but it's going to be good news for you at this point. If you probably realized, there's been 3 episodes published one day after another, just because they're all out. I'm all caught up. I'm so happy.
All 12 of you can get your BLV fix.
It makes me so. You have no idea. I'm so happy because it means I'm all caught up. Everything is published. All sermons are online. All podcasts are online. That means I'm not behind anymore. I don't have to get the stink eye from anybody. No one's been giving me the stink eye.
I was about to say, who's giving you the stink eye? I'll slap him with my Bible.
I give myself the stink eye because I hold myself to a high standard. If I don't, then I get lazy. That's how I avoid being lazy.
We do not want you to become lazy.
I have to hold myself to a higher standard and give myself the stink eye when I've been.
You just look at yourself in the mirror like,
yep. He's like, what are you doing? Publish it already.
You're all slapping yourself. Get yourself together. No, you've been busy and it's been understandable.
It's been a different working schedule. Yeah. It's been working until 4 a.m. It's fun.
Yep. But you know what? I know that none of you really care because none of us, nobody has reached out and saying, hey, where's BLV? But
that's true. Yeah. Oh, that makes you sad.
But you know what? We don't care. We care if you're listening to this, but at the same time, we really don't, because Stephen and I just enjoy doing this.
Right.
And it's actually, it's been really nice. So if you are out there and you're listening, if you've listened this far and haven't turned us off saying that these guys are goofs, then thank you for listening, because we dedicate not a lot of time right now, but we dedicate an evening and a Sunday to getting this put together. So we enjoy it. We enjoy talking about the word with you. We enjoy talking about the sermons. And plus also we have a lot in the works, y'all.
Yes. There's so much coming up. I'm so excited for.
Yes.
So excited for.
And we're still going to do Biggest Little Victory, but be prepared, like Scar says.
This is kind of like the testing grounds for everything else. It's kind of how. So
it's been a learn as you go. If you've been here since day one, good for you.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
Super
especially
good for
episode 1. That's always the roughest of any production. Is the very first episode. Like you look at any first season of any show, and you're like, "Whoa, got through that. All right."
And we also have plans for this one.
Yep.
So, where it's still a work in progress. It's kind of like a walk with Jesus.
Oh my goodness, she brought it back.
Look at that.
She brought it back.
Look at that circle that happened, you guys. Continue walking, continue growing, continue praying, continue asking questions, continue being confused. All of it. That's part of it. That's part of life. That's part of your walk with Christ. If there weren't any questions, it wouldn't be as popular as it was. It wouldn't be the oldest story ever told. Or a tale as old as time, as the great Walt Disney said.
Yeah. I mean, you think if we had all the answers, there would be nothing left to learn. But the fact that there are constantly more questions just means that there's still more of God for us to learn.
Yep.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Look at that.
I like that.
180, y'all.
Well, awesome. Yeah, no, I really like that. So we will be back next week, and I don't know what next week's is going to be called. He should just stick with wing stuff.
Yeah, right.
That's in there.
Fear
right?
for the wing. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to what comes of this study of Hebrews.
Yes.
It's been an eye-opener for sure, and I think that the thing that I really like about Hebrews is the mystery of who the author is.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
It's kind of interesting. It's like, ooh, who is it?
Well, and he said he's going to do a whole thing on Melchizedek.
Right. Thank you for saying that, because I wanted to say that, but I'm like, I'm going to butcher that word, so I can't say it.
It's one of those flim names. Melchizedek. I love that you don't even say, you just it's just a sound. The high priest.
That's just, oh gosh. Insert phlegm noise here.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait for that one. He's gonna make you preach that one.
You know what? I think I have a pretty easy verse to preach, so I'm not too worried about it.
I'm excited for it.
But if there are any fancy Hebrew words in it, I will mess them up. Just be warned.
It'll be good.
Yep. Even if I practice it a million times.
You're going to be your own guest on this podcast?
Well, I mean, it'll just be like now, like where it's just the two of us. And this is our guest, no Kendra.
You're just going to talk twice. You're going to ask yourself questions.
So what do you think about this? Well, Kendra, I really do think that this and this and this. Like, oh my gosh. And then people would write us and be like, put her away.
You have clearly jumped the shark. I can no longer listen. Oh man. Well, again, thank you all for listening. And if you've caught any hint of like what you like about this, then it's only going to get better as we move into new material. We'll, like I said, we're going to like Kendra said, we're going to continue to do this podcast, but there will be other ones running alongside of it in a completely different vein. Some of which not spiritually focused, but still humanity focused. Like
it has a food coloring drop of Jesus.
There you go. Food coloring drop of Jesus. So if you caught any, like if there's any bit of this that you have enjoyed, then it's only going to get better because we keep learning and keep evolving.
Yes, 100%. All right, everybody. Well, have a good week. We'll see you next week. Maybe with a guest, maybe not. I don't know.
You never know. We keep it fresh around here.
We do not plan things ahead. We just kind of go with the flow. But that's it.
See you later, everybody.
All right. Prayers and love, everybody.